past doesn't stay quiet, and here's why: families repeat what they never heal. You know, people say that the past repeats when it's not healed, and I do believe that. I believe unhealed things have a way of showing back up. They come back through family, through choices, through the way people love, through their fears, through the reaction before understanding. But I also think that we have watered down the word healing until it almost doesn't mean anything anymore. People talk about healing like it's some sort of a mysterious emotional fog that just descends on you if you cry enough, journal enough, forgive the right person, light the right candle, or finally tell the story out loud. And listen, I'm not against a good cry. Journaling is a very important process. Candles, yes, they can help. And telling the truth, those are all strong healing processes. Sometimes you need all of them and a snack. But healing is not passive. It's not just blind acceptance. It's not pretending that the past was fine because now you understand it better. Healing is when understanding gives you the power to choose differently. That's the part that I think that we miss. Knowing the past doesn't automatically heal anything. Knowing it gives you a map. It shows you where the patterns come from, what you're trying to protect, what it harmed, what it served, and what it keeps costing you. But the healing happens in the decisions you make after that. Do I keep living from this old fear? Or do I choose another directions with my eyes open? Do I keep repeating what was handed to me? Or do I stop and ask if this still belongs in the life that I am building for myself? Because the past does not repeat only because it was painful. The past repeats when people do not understand it enough to make the reasonable choices from it. I'll give you an example from my own family because this is not just something I talk about in theory. I have been deep into history and family history for most of my adult life. And those who know me know that I am from the South and proud of it. And yes, that comes with some complications real fast because history is never as clean as people want it to be. So let's just jump into the deep end and talk about the Civil War. When I started researching my family, I found people on both sides. That alone doesn't shock me. That's history. People come from many different lives and lived in different parts of the world. But then I came across one ancestor, my second great-grandfather, I.I. Robbins. He was a Confederate soldier and the last of 4 brothers to join, and later, after being captured, he turned his coat. And I'm going to be honest here with you. When I first found that, I was mad. Not because he served one side or the other, but because in my mind at that time, he had turned on the cause he had signed up for. I looked at that record and judged him for where I was standing in my modern comforts and the information I did not yet have. And I got so irritated with him that I stopped researching him for years. It sounds ridiculous now, but it's the truth. I had made a decision about him before I understood him, and that's exactly what we do with the past if we are not careful. We take one fact, one choice, one moment, and build a whole judgment around it before we understand the world that person was standing in. But what years of research and thousands of people have taught me, don't judge the decisions of the past. I try to understand the situations those decisions were made inside of. That doesn't mean I excuse everything. That means I slow down long enough to ask, what was the actual choice in front of this person? What did survival cost? So eventually I went back to Aha, and when I looked deeper, the story was not so simple as I had made it. Yes, he was a Confederate soldier, but he was also the last man home after three brothers were already serving. He was conscripted, which means that he was forced into service. He was sent straight into war at one of the worst points. He ended up in Gettysburg, arguably the bloodiest and most brutal battle of the entire world. In the next battle, one of his brothers was captured. And this is likely where he had already known that another brother was a prisoner of war. Who knew if he was alive or dead? Then, in only the third battle he participated in, Aha himself was captured and sent to Point Lookout, to one of the harshest prison camps in the Civil War. And that changes the way I looked at the signature on the piece of paper, because that oath of allegiance is not just a political statement. It is a man in a prison camp with little food, bad water, winter coming, disease everywhere, and no guarantee if he will live long enough to see beyond the shitty island that he was on. And if he was lucky, maybe he had a canvas tent for shelter with thousands of other starving, sick, and desperate men all around him. In all practical terms, that place was a death sentence, so he signed the oath. Now, I could sit here generations later and call him weak. I could keep calling him a turncoat, like I did when I first found the record. I could, but that would be saying more about my ignorance than his character. And because once I understood the circumstances, I have to admit to something uncomfortable. I was judging a survival decision from a life that I had never asked me to make that kind of choice. And it's not like he signed that oath and rode off into some happy ending with fiddle music playing in the background. Men like him were not trusted on either side. There is no evidence that he ever returned home to Randolph County, North Carolina. From what I found, men in his position were often sent out towards the edge of the frontier. He ended up in Illinois. So I think about what that means. To survive, he gave up almost everything he knew. The honor, as his community understood it, family, home, belongings, maybe even the right to be remembered fairly by his own family. And yet, because of that hard decision, family continues. Life continued. I'm here today. And so what did I gain from learning his story? I gained understanding, gained humility for myself. I gained the reminder that the past is not there for me to sit on a throne and judge people who were making decisions in circumstances I have never had to live myself. The past is there. This one taught me how complicated human choices can be. It is there to remind us that people are not always choosing between good and bad. Sometimes they are choosing between death and dishonor. Sometimes between home and survival. Sometimes between what they believed yesterday and what will keep them alive tomorrow. That's why I say healing is not just knowing the past. Knowing he signed an oath did not heal anything. At first, it made me angry, but understanding the story around the oath gave me a chance to make better decisions in my own life. I could keep judging from a shallow place, or I could choose a deeper kind of honor, the kind that tells the truth and still makes room for mercy. And that is what I mean when I say the past belongs in its proper place. It's a teacher, a witness, a warning. It's a root. It's not a cage. Aha's decisions is not my identity, but it is part of my inheritance. Not because I have to repeat or defend every part of his world, but because I can learn from the weight of his choices. I can honor that he lived through something brutal, and I can take that understanding into my own life by being slower to judge, quicker to study, and more honest about the fact that people make decisions with the knowledge, fear, pressure, and options that they have available in their time. That is the difference. The past does not heal just because we find it. The past teaches us when we are willing to understand it. Then healing comes from what we decide to do with that understanding. And that is really what I wanted to talk about today. What happens when the past refuses to stay quiet? What happens when it keeps showing up in family and in home and in relationships, in the same argument with different people wearing different shoes? The past deserves to be remembered. It deserves to be told honestly. It deserves to be honored where honor is due, grieved where grief is due, and confronted where harm was done. But the living still has work to do. We are not here just to repeat what came before us. We are here to understand it well enough to choose better. We are here to carry forward the wisdom without dragging the wounds behind us like a rusty wagon with one bad wheel. We are here to say, this is where we come from, but this is where I'm going. And maybe that's the real answer. The past stops repeating when it stops choosing for us, because we finally understand it well enough to make a different decision. That is how healing and how freedom comes about. That is how we honor what came before us without becoming trapped inside it. If this topic resonates with you, let's continue the conversation in the comment section below. Be well, my friends, and I will see you next time. Peace.